The year is 2012, and you are Rob Reiner, and you are appearing in New Girl alongside Jamie Lee Curtis playing your former wife, and you are the parents of Jessica Day, also known as Zooey Deschanel.
How far should I let you go with this bit? Like, should I be stopping you at this point, or do you have a whole thing lined up?
And that same Jamie Lee Curtis would appear in the Borderlands movie in 2024. Hi, welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, the guy who, I have to be honest with you, came in right when I was done with the original bit, and then I'm like, now I have to go a little bit longer. It's Sejohn Sarowick. Hi, Sejohn.
Now, for the record, you didn't have to. That was a choice that you made.
Right. No, I felt compelled to go a little bit further. And welcome, everybody, to the 399th episode of The Say Report. The 399th episode, as said by Zach from That Toy Makes Me Happy, more important than the 400th. And Sejohn, I couldn't agree more with that statement.
Yeah, so what are we going to do to celebrate this all-important milestone, the penultimate episode to the 400th episode?
Well, we had originally planned to not do anything, right? We were going to have a guest host right here introducing the show and doing everything. It's been about 100 episodes since Will Fournier took over the Say Report with our Princess Bride episode, and I figured, hey, let's do it again. But you know, the winds of change and all of that, they blow in mysterious ways. And Will was unfortunately rendered unavailable to do this episode.
Asunder.
Which means...
yeah, so just keep that in mind that as you're listening to this, you could have had that episode instead.
You could have had an episode that was either on Ungentlemanly Warfare, the Bureau of Ungentlemanly Warfare, or Cocaine Bear. Those were the topics, but instead, you're living in this timeline where we had to go with Plan B, as in Borderlands, baby. We are talking about Eli Roth's cinematic failure, Borderlands. I hope you heard all the question marks in my tone there, because I have a lot of questions that hopefully at the end of this episode, Sejohn and I can have answers to.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I'm actually legitimately nervous to talk about this movie. It's very rare that when we get into this position, when we're about to start talking about a very specific topic like this, that I feel unsure or unsteady ground, but I have some questions as well.
All right, good.
But before we get into that, was there other stuff we wanted to address?
I'm going to give you a little bit of time to soothe your nerves about talking about the Borderlands film with another Plan B, actually Plan BB, Beetlejuice. Were you able to get out to see it, Sejohn?
No, it did only come out yesterday or 2 days ago.
2 days, yeah.
Recording, right?
Yes, and I was like, I felt a little bit blessed that I was able to find a ticket to a show on Thursday for a pre-showing. So I'm not going to spoil Beetlejuice. I am going to say this. I liked it a whole hell of a lot more than I thought I was going to. So we'll definitely be revisiting Beetlejuice, probably in Beetlejuice, probably in 401, which, to answer your question, Sejohn, what's the joke about calling it Beetlejuice? I think it's so that they can do double features, and a person says, I'll have a ticket for Beetlejuice, and then the lights flicker. The movie theater. No, so I think that's it. I was really impressed with it, but what I can talk about that is not related to the plot of the film or ruining the plot of the film for anybody is the collectibles that my local movie theater had on offer. And to quote a very good friend of me, I'm a sucker because I fell for it. But can I go like one step further why I'm a sucker? Sejohn Sarowick, I'll have put this in supplemental materials, so if you're listening along at home and you're a member of the Discord, first of all, thank you for being a member of Discord. If you're not a member, why aren't you? We've given you every opportunity to join. So photos of the two collectible items will be in supplemental materials. Sejohn, that popcorn bucket that I shared with you, How much do you
Yeah.
think that popcorn bucket cost?
I mean, based off of what they've been doing lately with those, they're probably in the $20 range, huh?
That was a $30 popcorn bucket.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Sejohn just got
describe
sticker
this?
shock.
Because- yeah, just can you describe this? Because there's a part of it even I don't understand, and I'm looking at the picture of it.
All right, so the popcorn bucket that is available from Showcase Cinemas, National Amusements is their parent company.
Are they the ones that also did the whole like Dune vagina bucket?
No,
or
the
is
June
that,
vagina bucket, I believe, was AMC.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so this is not like more from these idiots. This is just some other.
This is,
okay,
I mean,
anyway,
every movie theater now has their own collectibles that come out alongside the movie. And when I saw the ones for Beetlejuice, first of all, it is rare that I'm going to get popcorn and soda for movies anymore. The ticket prices are so high, and honestly, the films are so long, you're playing a very dangerous game if you get, like, a soda.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Well, unless you get the P app. But the other thing is there's also so much risk nowadays if you're going to a first weekend, maybe even sometimes second weekend showing of a movie, that the bigger the budget, the more likely there's merch, the more likely this will be the movie everybody talks shit about for the rest of the year. And like not wanting to be repping on the wrong side of that conversation, you're taking quite a risk. Like when you were talking about buying stuff for Beetlejuice, I know that you don't really care if other people, like what other people's opinions about them are. So like at the end of the day, you were still going to enjoy it. But my immediate thought was, if this movie ends up being like a huge flop of any kind, and this becomes like the next like talked about movie for the next 3 months, I wouldn't want to have to admit to people that I spent $30 on that popcorn bucket, that I had that one at home. That again, I would like you to describe, because I don't understand what the insert piece is.
Oh, sorry, Sejohn. I was distracted. I was looking at my Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga collectible cup.
Exactly.
No, so what it is...
That's not even a joke. You do own one of those. I want to make that clear to people.
It is very much in the studio, specifically because I'm like, I want this Furiosa cup in my studio. So it works. Sometimes I wish we were a visual podcast, but I think we sold it. Anywho,
get in on those YouTube shorts. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe. That's a discussion for like after episode 400. So what it is, the popcorn bucket is a standard plastic popcorn bucket, and then it has an insert within it that is reminiscent of the grass in Adam's model from the first Beetlejuice film. So, and then, in addition to this grassy part that is in the popcorn bucket, you are handed separately a tombstone that is Beetlejuice's tombstone. So it doesn't have, like, the beautiful sign pointing down at it that you get in Adam's model once he somehow gets to the model. Like, everybody talks about how the Maitlands freed Beetlejuice, but Beetlejuice kind of got to their house on his own. Like I don't
understand. Kind of Beetlejuice's whole thing. That's kind of the whole.
Like
that's like Beetlejuice's whole bit. Is
is he? So he's living in the model, and so it's supposed to be reminiscent of the graveyard in the model. And I have to say, that's pretty cool. Like that alone was why, even as this movie sucks, I'm excited to get this tie-in popcorn bucket. I did also get the cup because I figured I could put it with my Furiosa cup in the studio. Worst comes to worst. But that's the popcorn bucket, and you're handed that too.
But what does it do? What?
It's
what
funny.
do you do with it?
You eat popcorn out of it.
No, I get the bucket part. The bucket part I understand. That's where the popcorn goes. You eat the popcorn out of it. You can get it refilled. Okay, reusable popcorn bucket. Dumb, but I get that. What is the benefit? Like, what is, like, because first of all, it's buried, it goes in the bottom of the bucket. So,
yeah, so that's
theoretically
what they're supposed to do, and that what they were not doing at the show. they're supposed to open it up and attach the tombstone and then fill it with the popcorn. So then you get a diner-like surprise as you're eating the popcorn where you're going for delicious popcorn and you accidentally grab the tombstone of Beetlejuice. It's a little bit better than a diner surprise because it's not Mickey Rourke's weird cock.
I mean, but there's yeah. So there's a weird bit here, right? Like, first of all, yes, what you're equating it to is definitely like a thought, right? But the other thing is like, is the idea that like because you're in a dark movie theater, I suppose this is the situation. You were in a dark movie theater with a bucket of popcorn, not paying attention to that bucket of popcorn, just watching the movie. Because we all genetically understand the size of popcorn and how much we can fit in our own mouths. So we are real good at like grabbing a handful, putting it in our mouths without looking, and just keeping our eyes on the prize, right?
It's very true.
What is going to happen if somebody reaches in and just grabs this thing? Like, is the joke supposed to literally be how you're choking on this plastic shit in the middle of the theater?
Now you get to live the movie, motherfucker.
What is the experience I am supposed to have with this item that justifies it being hidden in the bottom of a bucket filled with food that I am supposed to put in my mouth without looking?
I guess you talk about how humans are genetically predetermined to understand how much popcorn we can fit into our mouths. We are also genetically predetermined to never learn the lesson from Kinder Eggs. Or anyway. Nestle's Magic Ball. But here's the problem that I have with this popcorn bucket. The insert is screwed in. And the insert, by the very nature of it being an insert, does not go all the way to the edges of the popcorn bucket. So if you put butter on your popcorn, as any red-blooded American would do, right?
Right.
That butter is going to seep down below the insert. And then you got butter stuck in the bottom of your bucket. So your $30 collectible, right? Like you hold it and show people, oh yeah, I saw Beetlejuice. I have the bucket, obviously. Is a ticking time bomb of just like disgustingness. Now I had cleaned my bucket as well as I could, noticed that there was still a reservoir of butter underneath the insert, got out my trusty, iFixit screwdriver kit, they're not a sponsor, and unscrewed it and cleaned it again. But that's also when I noticed that the outside design, because the popcorn bucket itself is designed with the black stripes, and then it's clear plastic, so it's reminiscent of Beetlejuice's striped suit. It's starting to like show wear already, like the black parts of the bucket. So there was no way that this was going to be saved as a collectible. So I believe the whole point behind the tombstone is that when eventually you have this moldy, grody popcorn bucket, you can save the tombstone and chuck the rest of it out. And then still say to people, yeah, I saw Beetlejuice, here's my tombstone.
So fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's like, I can sometimes understand like what a marketing ploy is attempting to be and see where it fell apart. I don't even understand from the get-go what the bit is here, like what the hook of this particular item is. Ever since you sent me the picture of the bucket, I was just very confused of what I was supposed to be enjoying about that experience.
And you're right. You're 100% correct about that. But I really like that it like kind of recreates the model. That is the thing that like, well, I'm going to get this. Also the fact that my ticket was free. And I'm like, so I'm supporting the movie theater. I didn't expect to be supporting the movie theater to the tune of $35 after tax. But, hey, here we are. Because they don't tell you how much it costs before they fill the bucket. You can't be like, no, I'm not going to pay $30 for a piece of plastic. I'll do that and it'll be a Marvel Legends figure and there'll be a little bit more value. Only a little bit, though. So that was weird. And then the other thing I do want to talk about Beetlejuice. And again, you are completely safe. I am not. I liked the movie so much that I don't want to ruin anybody's experience with this film. That it's like bulletproof level for me. Think about that. Because I'm pretty sure I've gone on record as saying the first Beetlejuice is just fine. There may even be a whole episode where I'm like, this movie's just fine, of another podcast I was a part of in like the mid 2010s. But so that's the whole bit of it. But everybody at this showing of Beetlejuice had on a Beetlejuice themed T-shirt. And my PCU was going off, man. Like,
yeah, well, this is actually something that I noted out here in Utah about 6 or 7 months ago, specifically beginning to happen because the touring show for the Beetlejuice musical came through, and suddenly
Lauren Boebert gave a guy a handy jam.
Yeah, so there is a so there's also kind of that kind of movement like rolling into this one. It was to be honest, from a marketing standpoint and the ways in which they've kind of laid out this whole revival of Beetlejuice of all fucking things. This has been pretty good. Like the musical coming out a couple of years ago, moderately successful enough to then merit them kind of pushing this stuff with the movie. Not like the movie was dependent on the musical, but rather being able to push some of the more like the marketing a little bit further, like again being able to do things like the T-shirt that then mysteriously no longer says Beetlejuice the musical on it, it just says Beetlejuice. Like that kind of shit happening. Like there's just like there's been a lot of really good work to make sure that we were all ready for this particular movie to come out, and it seems to be paying off from what I understand. Financially it's doing pretty good.
Yeah, 2018 was when the musical came out, just because I wanted to confirm it, because I remember meeting Alex Brightman, who played Beetlejuice, after a Doug Loves Movies, and he was all like, "Oh yeah, I'm off from the show tonight," and I'm like, "Oh, the show meaning Beetlejuice the musical?" That was a fun time. I'm not going to lie about that. So yeah, no, they really did set it up, but I really enjoy the fact that, and this is the last one, Tim Burton directed another film, because he was very public about, I'm not doing films anymore after Dumbo, which I also really enjoyed in 2019. So like to get to see him direct a film again, and I'm not one of these crazy Tim Burton people who like think he's some sort of god upon this earth. I'm sorry if you are, Sejohn, but I don't think you.
No.
Like,
no, they're and like for me, it's more the idea. I don't know necessarily about them believing about him and like being a god or something, but there is a aesthetic that people will adopt that is very much revolves around just like a whole Tim Burton like oeuvre, right? Yeah. Like there is definitely a group of, I mean, it's an offshoot of goth, right? But I would never say that it is true goth or that goths also embrace this. It feels like it's very much separate from that, but it definitely feels like it was born from that attitude, right?
I agree. Yeah, so it's one of those things where everybody kind of loves it, and I don't know. But I enjoyed that. But the big thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that, like, I'm never buying a souvenir for a movie again. That price was just insane. And I do not feel like I got the value because of the fact that I think the whole thing is going to be broken and trash. I don't think there's going to be any saving it. And that kind of makes me sad, just to be honest about that. I don't know. But yeah, so there you go. That's the Beetlejuice portion of the episode. Which means that I think we're diving right into Borderlands, right, Siege? Our plan B if Will was not available.
I'm excited to.
I am too. What I need to say, and hopefully this will, if you have any nerves, this takes it all away. What the fuck is wrong with people? I don't know why people hate this movie to the level that they hate this movie.
Well, remember that we're hearing a lot of talk about opinions on this movie that infamously, didn't sell many tickets. So who are all these people that are bitching about this movie for a movie that supposedly not supposedly, we know for a fact because it's no longer in theaters because of it, was not getting watched, right? Like it's interesting, like, and cool. Okay. we have to put the rose-colored glasses like warning out there, right? We both seem to enjoy this film.
Yes,
I did.
I had such a good time with this movie.
That is where we're coming at this from. So like keep that in mind. So this is so but in retrospect, having time now to think about the picture as a whole, having seen the movie now and seeing the reactions to it, that was the first immediate thought to me was, man, I am finding a lot of negative talk about a movie that nobody saw. So like I instantly started to ask myself, how can I need to narrow down all of this nonsense to just the people I know for a fact saw this movie. You know, critics, people that are people that are posting their tickets like as proof on Reddit threads and stuff. Not that you have to do that, but it sure fucking helps me understand the actual conversation you're having if I know you did actually in fact see this movie.
You know what would
Because,
be really
man,
helpful if I bought my tickets through like a third party site. Let's say just arbitrarily Fandango, and then because I bought my tickets through Fandango, another third party like aggregate site that allows people to post their thoughts and rate films, I don't know, like randomly, Rotten Tomatoes would know that I bought a ticket, and that was the only reason that I could post my opinion on Rotten Tomatoes, is that they knew I saw it. If only like all of that could somehow happen.
Yeah, maybe they might want to find a nice middle ground where they introduce possibly like a third category for verified users or something to that effect, rather than just wiping out an entire fan base. But you know, we digress. But yeah, so there's a huge part of it there for me, right? Is the first thing is like acknowledging the reaction to this movie. The very first thing I had to remember is that, in all truth and honesty, what we know for a fact is that this movie did not get enough eyeballs in front of it. It just that is what happened. And so this movie is no longer in theaters. It went straight to streaming within like 3 weeks,
14 days,
4 weeks.
I think it was. I think it
10
was
days, some
ridiculously
horribly low
short
number.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
will have that for you while you're talking.
But yeah, so this movie goes straight to streaming. I had put off kind of seeing it because, I mean, my big thing was like, I don't want to participate in this conversation because if I like the movie, I'm just not going to be able to talk to anybody. If I don't like the movie, I don't want to listen to everybody rip it apart. I am the kind of person where if I don't enjoy an experience with with a piece of art in some way, I prefer to just let it be and walk away from it, because I've been on the other side of it too many times. I've been the one that has liked a thing that other people have not, and felt really kind of uncomfortable in the conversations of people who like to use words like everybody's mad at this or everybody hates that, and it's like, not everybody.
But here's the thing.
Shut up, Oprah.
Why are you watching Oprah while we record?
Oprah, shut up. What are you talking about?
When we stand...
All right, I don't know where. I shut the window and she kept talking. Oprah is not affiliated with this show. I was just trying to get information. It was 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks after its theatrical release. It was available on streaming.
Yeah. So, but acknowledging that feeling, right, of being that one person in the room who just really kind of wants to be happy and enjoy a thing, and everybody else is in a bad mood about it. I try not to be that guy, right? So if I don't enjoy a thing, I often don't talk about it outside of the context of like the show, where Devon and I are openly like acknowledging the conversation that we're having. Or rarely, if somebody really wants to honestly have a conversation about something that they didn't like, I'm up for that. I just don't need the noise, right?
Yeah. And honestly, this was one of those films, because of all the negative stuff around it. What I thought this episode was going to be when we put it in our break in case of Will not being able to host box was trying to understand where they went wrong. Like, we weren't going to be negative. We were going to approach it as academically as we approach the Adam Sandler stuff, right, or our very special episodes, and try to find it. What I did not expect was for this film to grab me by the cheek at minute 1 and have me the entire time. I was so on board for this film, and it really makes me question why. I mean, the target audience for this movie has to be people who played the game, right? And if you're somebody who played the game, how could you be disappointed with what was given? Which is why I have a pretty dark theory about everything that has happened with Borderlands. And I don't know if you have more to say before I introduce this dark theory.
No, I from the standpoint of somebody that does consider themselves a fan of this franchise, I mean, we've talked many times about my buy-in on the Borderlands franchise across the board. The Telltale games, like the whole Tiny Tina's Wonderland stuff. Like I'm in on this series. I think I have pretty much played everything they've ever put out as far as like a Borderlands title goes. I have, I even including DLCs and all that, right? Like I have touched every piece of this media, including like the books, there's been a couple of graphic novel things out there that have been really interesting in the ways in which they try to fill in pieces of the lore, but then as usual that's the first thing to get contradicted when another piece of higher respected media in the franchise, like the video games, comes along and just kind of just kicks the shit out of some of the stuff established in some of the stuff before. But that's how the stuff has always worked, right? Like I embraced like pretty much all of it. I can't think of a piece of it that I think is really kind of like offensive to me as a fan, and that now includes this movie, right? Like this movie is a piece of that, and I mean, a fun one. Like, it definitely rewrites a couple of things about like some characters and stuff. Immensely rewrites the history of Lilith for anybody. Like, there's going to be spoilers. Did we say that?
No, we haven't said it yet, but we're spoiling the Borderlands movie.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is a complete retcon on the life of Lilith. Like that is something that does have to be acknowledged, right? And there's things like that definitely happen in this film.
And
that
yet,
being
you bring that up. Sorry to interrupt, but you bring that up.
No,
that has not been the critique or criticism that I have heard about this film. They completely retcon a major character's entire character.
Well, and then my first thought, as somebody that, again, like, has embraced all of this from the beginning and loved the whole story of Lilith when they get into the whole stuff with the Firehawk and moved forward with her being the one to really, truly lead the resistance, because early on in the games, it really feels like it's going towards Roland until that moment in 2 when it's not. And it's just like, it's all of this really interesting stuff that they've done in the games with Lilith. This movie just does from the get-go. So there's also this idea that, like, it's not so much of a retcon because she didn't have much in this. Like, we don't know much about the Vault Hunters before they show up on Pandora. And that's and we've slowly learned more about them later on, but noticeably with the first 4, right? With Roland, Lilith, Mordecai, and Brick, those 4, we get so little on who they used to be except for a couple of like audio files. Beyond that, all we really kind of know about them is their story going forward, right? So the most that they retcon, more than just kind of introduce, because it just didn't exist before, the more what they retcon is just the idea of her predestination for this role as the Firehawk. That has never been really kind of established in the games, that she was always kind of destined to become this, but more rather like she herself just found it in her she grew into this figure, right? So like there's definitely some critiques there, like you mentioned before. There are critiques to be made about what they are doing with this character story arc of Lilith in particular, right? Other ones as well that we may talk about, but like this is a good example of a huge one that people could be talking about. And you're right, you're exactly right. This is not the kind of stuff they're talking about. They actually do a really damn good job in this movie of following some pretty good tenets in the lore of Borderlands. So the big thing about the planet of Pandora is that, like, it is built as a prison for this larger entity, right? That is what exists within the quote-unquote vault. And this alien race called the Iridians create this prison. The key to the vault is actually the moon Elpis that ends up becoming like a huge part of like the pre-sequel and stuff. And like, its key floats around this vault. And the thing is that in order to keep this huge thing like completely locked up, they put basically like a release valve on it. And that is this window in which this thing can get out. If they need to, they can let it get out and like kill a couple of things and then like go back in, right? And that is really what you find out in Borderlands 1, the video game, is what you've been doing the whole time, is basically trying to access the vault, which is this myth created by the Iridians to let this release valve out, so that basically anybody that comes looking for it is just going to get killed, but the thing won't get out. And that's like the whole bit of the Borderlands games. And they hint at that, and then they hint at the idea that eventually Atlas comes in and realizes this is what this thing is. Let's do a bunch of research on it, which it opens the door to Dahl coming in and doing all of the mining stuff, because they're basically just a shell company for Atlas. But then the Dahl company runs away and leaves everybody there to basically die to the psychos and the raiders, which is what we then see in Lilith's story in the movie. Right? So like they adhere to that there too. The idea that they have to go into the Caustic Caverns and they open the door or the hatch, and it says Dahl on the hatch, and it's never mentioned. It's never said. It's just it's there in the visual environment is fucking perfect. Like there's so much that they hear do that. And then we didn't hear a stitch of Hyperion in this movie, which is also really interesting considering the success of Borderlands 2 really being kind of the thing that's carried this franchise through 3 other games, I think, or something like that. Like the fact that we don't hear about Hyperion.
We don't hear about the company in a whole, but he does mention that he's from Hyperion, that Atlas is the competition. And Hyperion is branded all over, but you're right. We don't hear about the company or what they're doing right now at all in the film.
Because in the history of Pandora, it is the fall of Atlas that introduces the vacuum, the power vacuum for Hyperion to come in.
Yep.
So I wouldn't expect to hear about that until 2 now because of what happened in this movie. I wouldn't expect to see this into a sequel to see that kind of stuff happen. And it's unfortunate because we ain't ever going to see a sequel.
We're never seeing a sequel to this film. Unless my dark theory is correct.
Oh.
Yeah. So my very dark theory about this film can be summed up in a hashtag and 4 words. Release the Roth cut.
So I have a question about that, but you go forward.
No. I mean, it's
theory, but I have a question.
I just think that we have quantified, qualitative evidence about the Schneider cut and the fact that like people bitched and complained about the film so much that eventually HBO Max was like, fine, take this 4-hour movie. Just get it off our hands. You want it, you can fucking have it. And this movie, Borderlands, was completed in 2001 with test screenings happening in 2022. So 2021.
2021.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I said that. I just want to make sure that I'm saying this numbers right.
It's 20-year-old film.
It's 20-year-old film, right? From before Eli Roth was even on the map with Cabin Fever. And the game hadn't even released. No. So, yeah. So, the film was completed in 2021, screened in 2022, and by all accounts from Eli Roth, he had made a bloody, vicious, M-rated game adaptation appropriate R-rated film. And then when the studio got it, they're like, no, we want universal appeal. It needs to be PG-13. So they bring in Tim Miller to do a bunch of reshoots. To the fact that they end up having to hire a different guy to score the film. And everything is abandoned from it. So, like, it is out there in the world that there is some mythical cut that Eli Roth made of this film that is bloodily appropriate for what is being adapted. And I have to wonder, I don't want this to be true, but I have to wonder if all of the negativity that is surrounding the version of Borderlands that was released in August of 2024 is in some vain attempt to force the studios to realize you should release the age-appropriate, bloody R-rated film that you already have. I mean, that's just...
I think more than anything, I will say from a personal standpoint, it did put a huge, like, damper on my excitement to see this movie when I had heard that they had come in and because we have been hearing about this since 2021 or since Eli Roth had signed on to this movie, is that he knew that it was going to be a struggle to justify an R rating to certain people, but knew that that's what it had to be, and that had always been kind of the talk. And he had even come out with an R-rated version, and then that was when we started to hear about them coming in and doing the reshoots. That is when we started to hear about Eli Roth stepping to the side to let someone else do this kind of cleanup work. Like, and it makes it hard. It makes it hard to be excited about going to see the movie. So that for sure is at least part of the math in terms of the downfall of this film.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's one that I would say would be purposely orchestrated, but I'm also a big believer in the idea that, like, what is it? Never assigned to malice that could be assigned to stupidity, or however that saying goes.
I mean, it's 2011 was when the movie was first discussed about. A whole year before Rob Reiner would be married to Jamie Lee Curtis, a New Girl, for those keeping track. But the only reason why, like, it wasn't a dark theory until you brought up the fact so many people are talking about this film negatively. And the numbers that we have confirmed to have seen the movie do not jive with that. So that's when I start to wonder if, like with the release of the Snyder Cut, maybe there's some bots involved. Maybe there are some people who are just jumping on board so that they can have this thing happen, right? As far as I know, we haven't heard any Release the Roth Cut information yet, but then Release the Snyder Cut didn't really get any legs until 6 months after Justice League had released.
And noticeably started very heavily by guys like Snyder himself being in like the position at like, you know, Comic-Cons and stuff like that to talk about like how his disappointment and where, you know what I mean? So I think that if this is the case, keep your eye out for hearing Eli Roth being a little bit more loose-lipped about this film in about 6 months or so, and when people are asking him questions. The thing is, for me, is the reason why I don't really buy into this is because of how much Roth and the other creative voices behind this movie, I really haven't heard much from anyone since kind of the reshoot stuff. It was like everybody kind of went a little radio silent. You know, part of the reason that I, for those who don't remember, signed up for this whole stupid ass ad campaign when I found that QR code on the poster that day, right? When I realized what that was, and a big part of that was I hadn't heard shit about this movie in so long. I hope this is what they're like doing to get information out, and they still weren't, right? I talked about the idea that all ended up being a big disappointment. It was just a couple of like one sheets of the poster, like PDFs of the posters, and then like a couple of moments of like, hey, ask us about getting clips for the movie. Like, okay, this is nothing. You haven't put anything out. So like everybody's been so quiet since their initial reaction of the disappointment that this movie wasn't going to be the movie that they intended, that it makes me think that they gave up on it. And like and in a lot of ways, the Borderlands franchise is in a space right now where that kind of fervor like you got for the Snyder Cut, I just don't think could possibly ever be there. Right? You know, maybe if this had come out just after Borderlands 2, and, you know, maybe if it had been in the wake of that kind of excitement. But since the negative reactions to Borderlands 3, the negative reactions to Tiny Tina's Wonderland, the ways in which the Telltale stuff has not been as well received as they had hoped when they tried to do that whole growing in the franchise, I just don't think that you have the fan base. You do have a fan base. This is not me saying that one doesn't exist, but I just don't think that you have the same size fan base. You definitely don't have the same size fan base as you did for something like a Justice League movie done right. You know, I don't think there are people out there that think that, oh, Borderlands, a movie, could be this, unfortunately. You know, and, you know, it's a wild kind of like speculative conversation until it isn't, right? Because like, it's just the second you start seeing these rabbit holes that people are going into to talk about a movie that, as you and I have said many times, probably didn't see. Yeah, right. And there is also something like I recognize there are other ways to watch this film for some people that don't necessarily register on things like the budget and stuff. And so like, yes, maybe somebody out there did get their hands on this thing and has seen it and does have those opinions, but I cannot help but wonder now every time I look at one of these conversations now, like after watching this film, who is actually engaging with the material in the film itself when they talk about not liking it, and it's shockingly little.
Yeah, it like that, and that's why. And I do think that maybe there was some hope that people would see the film, and then there would be some justification for like a discussion about that. If it was a plan and something like that, I think that the relative failure of the film in its current state would have taken any idea of let's try to start a campaign to release the original film. I think that has gone by the wayside. But what I will say is New York Comic-Con, if we hear something out of that, then I would consider my dark theory to have a little bit more weight to it, a little bit more legs. Yep. Right? As the first major Comic-Con event after the release of this film, if they drop the murmurs of a Release the Roth Cut whole thing, we'll see where things are then.
You know, the other thing that we might see is it might get tied kind of to the back end of anything going on with the Thanksgiving franchise, which has been slowly taking off like a rocket.
Yeah.
It did so well last year that it got immediately greenlit for a sequel that they're definitely making. And like, if that continues doing well, and Eli Roth is able to put himself back in front of, again, put himself in front of some microphones and get some conversations started. If he is interested in doing a Borderlands 2, which is the other side of that, again, I keep saying, like, I haven't heard anybody from the creative side really clamoring to fix this like you did with somebody like Snyder, who for all of his faults about everything that he handled with the Snyder Cut, and for all of my disappointment in all versions of that movie, I don't for a second doubt that Snyder thought he had something. You know what I mean? Like Snyder was so confident that what he had was something that he could proudly show off to the world, and I will give him that for the confidence, right? I just haven't heard that from anybody else involved in this movie. Like, I haven't heard this from anyone involved in this movie, that the disappointment that their version isn't in front of people's face, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, film has changed so much from the time that we got the Snyder Cut, right? What it means
from the time that this movie was made.
Yeah. Like, it is all just speculation at this point. But I will say, if you're somebody who was going to see this movie, my mother saw the show and was like, I'm not interested, right? That was her reaction to the trailer for Borderlands. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, well, why the fuck would you be? Right? Yeah. Like, I don't know why you need to declare out loud to the whole movie theater that you're not interested in this particular film. But also, I wouldn't have ever thought you would be. Maybe Jamie Lee Curtis would get you excited, but
which trailer did you see? Because I think there were two out there. There was one that was much more like, sorry,
the first trailer that came out,
the one that was very Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
that's why I was curious, because they definitely do, like, in the first trailer that had come out, they were definitely leaning into that. And I have to think, back when this movie was being written and made back in the late 2010s, right? It's not a bad bad thing to aim for. No. It's not a bad angle to take, right? Like, yeah, let's do, like, we could do this, but if we put a good soundtrack on it, which Borderlands famously already has, right? Like a pretty fucking rad, recognizable soundtrack. There are straight up songs written for those games. like then why not, right? Like, why not lean into that with the like cowboy-esque sci-fi nature of those franchises? So like I almost kind of wish they had continued to lean into that in the marketing. The fact that trailer came out, and then after that there was a trailer a little bit more later on that was a little bit more like, no, we promise it's PG-13, but it's going to still be Borderlands, so here's some violence, that like is just a bunch of cutaways from explosions, which is what they do in the movie, right?
Yeah, right. We never get to see the limbs and the blood raining down upon our wayward.
There was one point in this movie where towards the end there's a everybody celebrating because the good guys have won, and there is a moment where they show some kids in the street playing soccer with a Crimson Raider helmet? Question mark. There's a good chance that there's a head in that helmet.
Probably Bobby Lee's. Let's be completely honest.
There's a part of me that was just like, yeah, see, this is where I wanted to see the Eli Roth cut, right? Is I'm just like, I want them to be kicking that for blood to be going everywhere. Like, that's got to be the joke.
Yeah. Oh, man. And there are still some. I mean, first of all, why wouldn't you lean to Guardians of the Galaxy when you have young Gamora playing Tiny Tina? Not to be that guy, but you have to, once you evoke GOTG, we have to talk about that small connection. There are some vicious moments with Tina. There's the one where she, like, jumps on the guy and just breaks his neck.
Cracks his head. Yeah,
and I was like, wow! Like, that was a wow moment. Even though, like, there wasn't blood and viscera and bones sticking out of the neck.
I mean, they must have dialed back, because, like, so those were the moments where she, there's a moment where she, like, double stabs a dude and stuff like that. And those were the moments where I was like, I could see where Eli Roth would definitely be going so much further with this whole story about how Tina has to kind of slowly become more violent, right? More psychotic in order to survive on Pandora, which is kind of the story that they keep hinting at wanting to tell, is about how Pandora really changes people. Pandora really is like this place that somehow just drives people mad. And again, going back to the history that I was talking about, all of this stuff about it being actually in the end not a planet but a prison that is masked as a treasure chest so that like the worst people in the universe come and get killed by it. Like that is the idea that people then live on it, right? Because of the way that capitalism works, is this whole thing from the games that this movie keeps wanting to tell, that these people come here looking for a better life and this planet just ruins them, is supposed to be the whole concept of Pandora. And this movie is so close to wanting to talk about that every moment, but it just never quite gets there. And I have to imagine that in an R-rated version of this story, that if they are able to get so much more violent with what Tina is actually becoming by being there, and what Lilith is turning back into by being there, like if they really wanted to lean into it, that would clearly be the first stuff that would get cut for a PG-13 cut. Like, to me, that makes the most sense of what's probably in the pieces we've lost, is that exact kind of thing with Tina and Pandora as a whole.
I agree. Because it kind of stinks that, like, you can see all of the framework there, and then you never dip that little bit lower. But I'm not upset that we're not dipping that little bit lower, because I'm being entertained by everything that I'm seeing on the screen. Nothing in this movie made me go, huh? Like, I'm like, no, this is fine. Like, we have this unique experience. You, I, and most people our age, right? We saw the Super Mario Brothers movie, right?
Yes.
Like, we lived
Street
through
Fighter
the Super
was
Mario
the one
Brothers.
I kept thinking of.
Yeah, right? And, well, it's Street Fighter, one of our very special movies later on this month, alongside Double Dragon, which is another one, Mortal Kombat. Mm-hmm. But we lived through this time where video games transcended their medium and jumped to what is the largest medium for entertainment at the time in the 90s. And I still think that right now, like, the reason why Hollywood is losing its mind is because our big moneymaker for the last 100 years has suddenly started coming up dry. How do we save our well, basically, is any discussion about how do we save the movie industry. Mm-hmm. So, but, like, I saw the Super Mario Brothers movie. We've talked about the Super Mario Brothers movie where instead of, like, going to a happy, magical land, they go to Dino Hatton, which is a dark reflection of our universe because of the lack of, natural resources.
Yeah.
And, like, so watching something like Borderlands and the changes that they made, like, none of it offended me. None of it was like, well, I can't enjoy this. A lot of it was like, wow, that's a really good way to, like, streamline a bunch of lore so that I can understand it in 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. There's something to be said about the idea that they are trying to do something in this movie, an hour and 40 minutes, hour and 30, really, with if you think credits. Yeah. But, like, they're trying to do something in an hour and a half that took the games, even just looking at the first game, is a 50-hour experience, right? Like, you could probably do it in less if you were speedrunning it, but to, like, take in the world and the ways in which we're talking about, to believe in the verisimilitude of the planet of Pandora, like, to really truly be there, like, that idea, like, even the games take 50 hours to let you do that. To let you find that place. The movie is only ever getting that 90 minutes, possibly 2 hours. I don't think there's a 4-hour cut of this movie. I would maybe see a 2.5-hour cut of this movie as opposed to the 90-minute one we saw. But in the end, like, it's never going to be that. It's not. Maybe if they wanted to go there, they could talk about the concept of the television show. But even then, you only ever really get 6-8 episodes. So it would be
and it would just feel like a movie cut up. Like they right. Don't do, that's what they do now. Looking at something like Furiosa, I brought it up. It's on the table. I feel like that was meant to be a TV show, and then they're like, let's just release it as a movie because it really feels very episodic, right? And we've also seen movies, specifically with MCU projects, that got turned into TV shows that really just like, 30 minutes, right? That's the length of an episode of TV show. Here's our arbitrary end point. And it's like, no, what? Like, I got nothing from that show. What are you doing? So it does feel like this was clearly written to be a film. I can't imagine that at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been longer of 3 hours total runtime, including credits. Because I just don't think that this world as somebody who was totally on board for the 90 minutes of this film, I was crying. I was like I'm like, what is happening here? Oh my goodness. Like, I don't think that I would have been held at that same attention for that amount of time. Right? Because, like, I don't know. Like, it just, I was very happy that this 90 minutes happened the way that it did. But, like, as somebody who's played the Borderlands games, I can kind of do them in at most, like, 2-hour segments before I'm like, and now it's time to play something else. Right? Like,
Yeah. Well, one of the big things to think about is the way that the Borderlands games works, right? Like in this, but like the way that the Borderlands games work is that you hit a hub world of some kind. It's not always necessarily one hub world. There's 3 or 4 of them placed throughout, like the maps of the games. But then from those hub worlds, you're assigned mini quests or you're assigned quests and smaller quests and dungeon runs and all of this sort of shit. So you leave the hub world, you go do the quest, then you come back to the hub world. But that story is usually contained within that quest, right? Now there is always that overarching narrative of the whole thing, and that's like the 60-hour experience. But basically, what this movie is doing is looking at one of those 2-hour mini-bite experiences that you also get in those games and trying to scale down the larger story to that size, right? And like, yeah, it's going to lose some stuff. It's going to lose some nuance. It's going to lose some depth. It's going to lose some characters. It's going to lose all of that stuff, right? So essentially, if you're against the idea of a Borderlands movie in general, then like, yeah, okay, like there's nothing I can do for you. But if you came into this movie expecting them to tell the 60-hour long deep experience that you get from the video games, but knew coming in it was only an hour and a half long, like, you set your expectations too high, my friend. Like, I think that's another part of it is like everybody always wants their thing to be the thing in the movie that like, as a fan, there's always that one thing from a franchise that we just wish, this goes all the way back for me, like to my friends doing the Harry Potter movies and being disappointed that the scene where the pot falls out of the hat isn't in the movie, and you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't even remember that part. But to them, that was such an important thing. Why wasn't that in the movie? And like, I feel like there's a lot of that going on in the terms of, again, not sure if anybody even saw this movie, but people just straight up complaining that, like, Mordecai and Brick aren't present, but you have the Roland and Lilith stuff going on. Why are we so heavily invested in Tiny Tina in this story when she's really just a side character? And it's just like, it's all of this stuff of just like, okay, so like, you the thing that you love in the franchise isn't going to be represented. So that just means the whole thing's a fucking bust, because there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of differing opinions on what their favorite thing in the franchise is. So, like, should we just not make this movie then? And for some people, the answer is yes.
Yeah, if you're not going to do it the way I want it done, why would you waste your time? Is how a lot of people respond to things. And I got to be honest with you. The reason I was excited to see the Borderlands movie was Cate Blanchett. I'm not really a person who like, oh my God, I need to see these people's films. But when Cate Blanchett, who I tend to like in films, right? Are You There, Bernadette was excellent to keep this whole Linklater thing I've had going on lately rolling.
She's the one in Blue Jasmine,
Yeah,
right?
exactly right. Blue Jasmine was the next one that I was going to bring up, where like she can make you forget about Woody Allen.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah, she's really good in
Carol. It makes me so upset that I will never not be able to think about that movie.
Right, whenever you think about her. Ocean's 8, which I know that people have complicated feelings about Ocean's 8, but her stepping into the role of Brad Pitt and
the
like
Russ character,
speaking of Plan B. Sorry. But no, like I love her as an actor, and she friggin' showed up to play Lilith. I was so on board with her being this bounty hunter and that being her backstory. She was
fucking badass too. Those fight scenes with her where she's doing all of the gun reloading animations, and like, I know a lot of that is CGI, but like, she is selling the hell out of all of it.
Yeah.
Like she has her own little superhero movie in this movie, and it's fantastic. It's great.
Really works. But the whole thing where Atlas like hires her to save his daughter, and the way that she's like shoots the 3 guys, but like skips the one guy to keep him alive. Like, that was cool, right? Like, she was a very interesting character, and it really worked for me. And I don't Like, yeah, people like, she doesn't really do anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? She did such a good job. Kevin Hart, I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Hart, but Kevin Hart was a convincing Roland. I really dug it.
Yeah. I mean, I was expecting from the ways that, again, people were talking about this movie, I was fully expecting to come in and see, like, Kevin Hart doing the same shit he does when he's making a movie with The Rock, right? Or, like, when he's making, what's the one he did with Ice Cube, the series he's been, the Die Hard series?
Oh, no.
Oh, Ride Along, too.
Yeah,
no,
the Ride Along movies are with Ice Cube.
Yeah, Ride Along as well. I was talking about the Die Hard movies that he's been doing, too. I can't remember who is. I thought it was Ice Cube, but maybe it's something else.
Ice Cube is in the Ride Alongs. I don't know who's in the Die Hard movies. I can look it up. I have it right here. That's the beauty.
But yeah, there's just I was expecting there to be more of watching Kevin Hart be on screen. You know, it's the same problem that people try to ascribe to people like, funny enough, Jack Black, which is a conversation we got to have here in a second. But also, you know, Chris Pratt, right? It's the whole Chris Pratt Mario problem, where everybody's just like, oh, you just got to sound like Chris Pratt, and then like the movie makes $1 billion, so clearly people were able to get over that. Like so there's just this kind of thing that's what I was just expecting to see. And that's not what you get. Like, there's some legitimately good, like, Roland-esque, like, lines and moments. I love the whole conscience moment when he pulls the gun on Lilith when they first have the chance to actually have a conversation about where she stands on everything.
Yeah,
I think that, like, that was perfect. His whole sacrificial moment, like, was straight up like, yep, this is the most Roland thing that would happen in this fucking moment. And so there is the idea of the how the fuck did he find them moment at the end, because they're like, just to point out some plot holes in this movie, because there's plenty of those, but I think it comes from what we were talking about there being some portion of this film that we're never going to get to see that doesn't exist, right? Yeah. I don't have any idea how the fuck he finds them in that valley on what is presumably the other side of the fucking planet.
I mean, as far as I can tell, it's probably the Crimson Lance. The fact that he used to be one, he gets some information from that. In fact, the head that we see getting kicked around, right? We're just going to say it's a head. We're not going to say it's a helmet. That very well could be a reference to a scene where he returns to to Firestone and is like, where are they? How can I find them?
Oh, right. In that case, it probably would be Bobby Lee, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
right.
That would probably,
Larry, you're still here. And he's like, yeah, I'm not signed off for active duty.
We're just armchair fixing this movie, because as it stands,
there's
just this huge plot hole, and like he just shows up in that moment. But also the most Roland thing that would happen
exactly. He would have sacrificed himself earlier, and then as soon as you need him, here comes Roland to save the day. It really worked. But you bring up like the whole Kevin Hart of it all and the Rock movies. I honestly thought this was going to end up being a, like, Jumanji 3 sort of situation. Like, I was fully expecting it to be at the end of this and it pull away to people playing the game. And, like, that, and I would have been fine with that. But, like, you put together some of the parts that are in this film, basically Kevin Hart and Jack Black, right? And you put together the fact that the last two Jumanji movies have been Jumanji the video game, right? And it's not that it was an expectation, right? Because having expectations like that, it was one of those things where I'm like, if that ends up how they want to frame all of this, I would be fine with it. Yeah. But then it needs to work. It needs to work. It needs to be freaking Dwayne Johnson playing as Roland.
Yeah.
Like that would be the bit there, and that'd be fine. And that doesn't happen. And I'm completely fine that it doesn't happen, because the film, and this is the thing that so many video game adaptations are afraid of, commits to what it is trying to present. It is committed to its adaptation of Borderlands. It doesn't magically change halfway through. Like, it doesn't change with the whims of that. So, as much as there is a Roth cut that is bloodier and maybe has a couple more scenes to explain some of the plot holes, I do believe that what we are seeing here is as close to what Eli Roth's vision for this film was from the start. And as the writer and director, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's definitely like some stuff missing. Just to point out, just one other big kind of gap that I noticed is I already kind of hinted at it with the Tiny Tina stuff, is that she tells the story that really this is another kind of bit of a retcon. This cloning story, as far as I remember, I don't think that's part of her original.
I know, but Krieg is her father, right? Like, and then separated.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it's one of those things where it's very heavily hinted at with that Krieg is her father. Like she talks about having a father that gets worse, like loses his mind more and more. Like we know Krieg does, and Krieg talks about having a daughter on Pandora and wanting her to teach her to take care of herself before he can't be aware enough of himself to take care of her anymore. So there's like the fact that they're telling those dual stories, it's really hard to not say, oh well, clearly these stories are connected, right? Like you're getting them both at the same time just from other sides. Why would they not be the same story, right? Any good narrative would work that way, but then it never quite lands that, and then they roll into all of the stuff with him and Maya in the later games, and it becomes more about his falling in love with Maya and Maya potentially having the ability to actually heal some of what he's lost, not all of, but there's like an entire DLC where you literally go into his brain and start like killing off bad versions of him and stuff. Like so that kind of gets lost in the mix of the games. So this movie just not even going there with it, I kind of don't blame them, right? And they do kind of do this whole thing where she talks about him as a brother. So like I kind of appreciated like that, just that nod. The second that they started talking about daddy in the first couple of moments, I was just like, what? And then they introduced Krieg a second later and I'm like, what?
And I'm just like,
but I knew, I was like, they're just not going to address the dad thing because the games don't do a good job of it either. So like, yeah, there's some weirdness there. But no, the bigger thing with Tiny Tina in the movie is like, all franchise shit aside, talking about just the film as a film, which is where I think
what
the
you have to
criticism lies.
Yep.
Right, but I think this is where the true criticism of the whole thing lies. She keeps talking about this idea of being told as she's growing up that she is a special one, right? But it never truly manifests. And there's this one moment where it could, which is when they are falling in the elevator and then they phase shift to a safe location. And she talks about how she must have been the one to do it because she's special and all of this stuff, right? I completely misunderstood what had happened in that second. I thought they had been phase shifted for sure because they do like kind of show it happened, and they start trying to figure out what happened. But I thought the implication was going to be somebody else did it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, somebody else did do it, but
right. That scene, and then on the larger scale, Tina's whole kind of story about being special is really, really empty. Like it shows up, it surfaces every now and then, but it really isn't kind of built into the rest of it until suddenly the moment at the end when when they're talking about how she may have to be the one to die in order to open the vault, and then she steps onto the thing and all of this stuff, and it doesn't work because she's not. So it's like this big oomph moment of, man, after all this time, I'm not the special one. But all I was thinking in that moment was, well, I never thought you were. Like you kept kind of just saying that, but nothing in this movie has kind of justified or put any like foundation to that, right? So that was just another big hole of like, this movie really wanted me to think that Tina was the one this whole time, only for the twist to be that it's been Lilith this whole time. And really, I kind of had always known it was Lilith and never thought it was Tina. So like that entire thing kind of just didn't work for me.
I mean, you're bringing in some baggage knowing what is happening from the game, right? It would be a huge... Every critique and criticism of this film that I've heard, it'd be huge if Lilith wasn't a fucking siren. If they took that away from her character, everything I've heard would be justified. And
I will say this: they have kind of done that because in the game universe, despite the vaults not being open, and there are multiple in the games, but despite the vault not being open yet, there are still sirens in the universe, and the lore is like there's always 5 to 6 at a time, depending on what's going on with like transfers of power and stuff. Sirens can pick a person to get their power when they die, but more often what happens is sirens die and then the power goes out to the universe, and the universe picks somebody random. So like there's this whole thing about how there is already magic in the world. In this movie, they kind of say, no, the magic kind of comes into play when like we start talking about iridium and stuff like that, which is fair because that's kind of what the games start to do later on, and you're just like, how the fuck was this? But anyway, they do things with Lilith that are kind of hinting, right? And the biggest one being the example of when she finds the key piece in that vault, not vault, what would you call it? Storage.
Well, it's the storage facility.
Right.
Area 761.
Right, but when they're in the storage facility and she finds the key, right? She's drawn to it, she picks it up, there's a weird magical moment. So like there's little things like that with Lilith that they don't do with Tina. And that's exactly what I mean, right? Is yes, I'm bringing in some baggage from the games there, but what I'm saying is that in the world of the movie, they even do things to be like, ooh, something weird's going on with Lilith, something weird's going on with Lilith, and they never do that with Tina. So it doesn't matter to me that Tina is telling me she's the special one. The movie's never showing me that.
But I think here's where the movie succeeded for me with Tina being the special one. That whole monologue comes from Tina. And the reason that she believes it is because it's indoctrination from Atlas, this whole thing.
Oh, I 100% believe in all of that.
Yeah.
And the justification for the whole Atlas story and all of that, that worked for me. So I didn't really need this weird twist to it to like having her just be an Atlas clone and having information about the vault would have worked for me just as much as her being the key to the vault. Like it seemed like putting a hat on a hat, and that second hat was full of holes.
It worked for me because once she told her whole thing, I'm like, all right, there's nothing special about her. She is like cloned from the blood of something on the key piece, but that doesn't mean anything. That could just be anybody's blood. I also
was trying to figure out if she was supposed to be a clone of Lilith at some point.
No. They got the blood from the first vault key piece that she had with her. So that's the whole thing there. So I liked that whole storyline because once she tells, like, I'm the special one, I'm going to open this thing, it's like, well, that's what, if you're indoctrinating a clone, you want them to believe that, right? So that if they do ever end up on the planet, they're going to do whatever is in their power in order to fulfill that goal for you, right? And so it's this really interesting thing where, like, in that moment, I'm like, oh, so there's really nothing special about this kid outside of the fact that she is a clone whose purpose is to find the vault. But she is not the daughter of, I can't think of Iridium. She's not the daughter of Iridia,
yeah.
Sorry. There's no way that she's the daughter of Iridia. And I'm like, but that's fine, because Lilith is here. So I have a pretty good idea how the story is going to go. So, like, again, it's baggage that I'm bringing into it, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But it made the whole Tina story about being special and the way she was acting, like, it's so much told your entire life that you're going to be the one.
Right,
and like,
right.
and then like,
so I can't die. I'm going to be the one is basically her attitude.
Yeah.
In a lot of
So
places,
of course, like,
sure.
It explains all of her actions, all the way that, like, her lack of fear. Like, she's like, I can't die because I haven't done the special thing I've been told I have to do yet. And it's just really, it's like an interesting way to look at that through the grimiest, most cynical lens. And that's where I connected with it. Is that just like, oh, this poor girl. Right? Because she is a girl. She is a human. She's alive. Like,
the other thing for me is it was hard talking about baggage from the games. It was hard for me to look at this story and not think about the ways that they didn't introduce Angel in this movie and very much are using kind of Angel's story in that regard.
Yes.
And the fact that it doesn't pan out is really interesting. Like, she is not in the end special because in the games, Angel ends up being one of the other sirens in the universe, and it's like this whole thing that is connected to that. So yeah, just some really interesting stuff. Again, I could see how they could then start to kind of correct, not that they have to, but correct's not the right word because there's a connotation there, but introduce a lot of that kind of stuff by moving into the Hyperion story in a Borderlands 2.
If there were a
right?
sequel,
Again, which
yes.
will never happen. Right. Like, they could easily, from where they left this, move into that. And I think that's one of the other big differences when people talk about these kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? Interpretations, like
adaptations?
Leaving shit out.
Oh,
adaptations,
okay.
Yeah. But like when they leave stuff out and people are upset because they're like, oh, this thing's not in it. If they're smart enough to leave a good size hole for that piece to fit later, then I'm okay with that, right? Whereas like something like I think I've talked about this before in the movie of Aragon, the idea that they completely erase the race of dwarves and remove them even from like the origins of like the stones, the magic stones, the big MacGuffins in those books, like by doing that, they eradicated any chance of ever doing the sequels because the sequels are dependent on the actions of the dwarves in the first book and the history of that world to happen. So those, not only did that movie do terribly and not justify a sequel financially, it also, like, narratively could never have told the sequel books because it bluntly just left out huge moments in the first story where an entire other set of people in the world needed to exist in order for those events to happen. And so this movie doesn't do that. Like, there's nothing in this movie that tells me that we couldn't see Brick or Mordecai in a 2, that we couldn't see the next set of Vault Hunters show up, that we couldn't see this whole idea with introducing Angel and everything going on with Handsome Jack and Hyperion. Like, Elpis introducing stuff going on the moon at the time. There are characters like Athena and stuff like that come out of the Atlas cores going forward that would be interesting. The reintroduction of General Knox, I think, would actually be really wild because, yeah, she comes back. Well, he comes back in the games, but, like, she comes back. The idea that Atlas has, like, a siren working for them. Like, there's all of this stuff that wasn't in this story that was present in the original Borderlands that I don't feel like is gone forever. It doesn't have to be, right?
If this film could have justified a sequel, there's a lot of ways that they could have brought things back. I mean, the fact that they don't kill the monster in the Pandoran Vault was an interesting choice for me.
To not have that be the big fight at the end of the movie, but rather to have it be against Atlas and them.
Was cool.
Which honestly, like, a more fulfilling ending than the ending of Borderlands 1. I think people forget that when the first Borderlands game came out, it had some pretty heavy criticism about its story and about the ways in which it kind of went nowhere and kind of didn't have, you were very meandering, which is what made Borderlands 2 such a huge success as a video game, is because they took all of that honest criticism about the first game to heart and kept all of the stuff that people loved and were able to make a pretty big, like, masterpiece of video game history in Borderlands 2. Like, the success of that game on the heels of the criticism that Borderlands 1 had received, and the fact that, like, it had originally been like, this game has such a storied history in video game history because, like, it was originally going to be intended to be a much more serious game, much more like in the early days, like, it looked like Destiny almost, which Destiny came later, but, like, playing Destiny felt like everything that I had originally thought Borderlands was going to be. And then it went through this whole revamp. They wanted to make it funny. They decided to introduce a new art style with the cell shading. Like, they completely retooled Borderlands into the franchise that we know today, kind of on the fly, like, mid-development, when the original idea wasn't going anywhere. So, like, there's so much about, like, the history of Borderlands that, like, is tied up in kind of, like, the history of games and where games decided to go and all of that sort of shit, that there's a lot that they can play with, and this movie just feels like it's such a good homage to the fun parts of it. Like, I just don't understand how you can watch this movie and be so disappointed in it, because it was a blast. It was not an encapsulation of everything, but it was a fucking blast.
I think hearing you talk about Borderlands 2 and remembering that sort of disappointment with Borderlands, I got Borderlands for $5 with everything in 2011. 2011,
the Game of the Year edition, like the Game
it
of the
was
Year
not
edition
even.
of
It was a
Borderlands
PlayStation Store sale where it's like you can get everything for $5, and I had the game from like PS Plus, and I was enjoying myself. I will admit, the first Borderlands games I really enjoyed, and what I kind of liked about it was the fact that, like, you're just this scum of the fucking earth on this planet getting to do whatever you want to do. Like, there was no even hint of there being a moral good system. At the end of the day, you're on this planet killing shit for your own needs, right? You are a selfish motherfucking character. And then that sale came out where I could buy the game so I would actually own it, not just have the license while I was a PS Plus member, with all the DLC for $5. And I remember talking to one of my coworkers who was also playing it, and I'm like $5, like, is it worth that? Like, it feels like I'm going to be buying something that's not good. And he's like, I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't answer that question for you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go for it, though. What is $5 in the grand scheme? I've enjoyed what I've done so far. And then when I got to that thing and found that, like, the vault was just this huge MacGuffin to kill people looking for the vault, right? It was, like, awesome. And then, like, you overcome that. That felt so good, to the fact that, like, I wasn't going to buy Borderlands 2 at full price, right? Because I wasn't certain if the fact that I got to play Borderlands for such a low like cost of admission was part of why I enjoyed it. But I remember renting it from Redbox of all places. Remember Redbox? They were owned by Chicken Soup for the Soul Company when they died.
In the end.
But like I rented Borderlands 2 and was immediately like, this is even better. Like,
yeah,
it really worked for me. And then I bought Borderlands 3 right on release, and we played it, and I had a blast with it. So, but I think the bigger issue, right, when I talk about how devalued Borderlands was prior to the release of that second game, is its fan base, which we have alluded to a lot in this episode, really started with Borderlands 2. And you go back and you try to play Borderlands, is very much a PS3 game that has been given another coat of paint. So like, and that's fine. And I still enjoy it. I'm not saying that as a negative thing, but it is a true fact. If you're somebody who started with Borderlands 2 and then you're like, I want to go back and experience the first game, there's a really good chance you're not going to enjoy it.
Bring friends, like because one of the big things about the Borderlands franchise, and this is true across all of them, to the point where Borderlands 3, this straight up breaks the game. Literally, Devon and I have trophies that'll never pop because of this nonsense. It doesn't give a shit about like making you do everything as long as somebody in the group does. So like it's one of those games where you can be on the other side of the map, pick up a piece that is required to fix the machine back in Sanctuary, and somebody can still be in Sanctuary and fix the machine instantly because you pick this thing up, they have it too. And it's like that across the board for so much stuff. Turning in bounties, everybody turns it if one person goes and turns it in. So if you want to play the original Borderlands game, the best way to do it is with at least a buddy. I recommend 3, like do the 4-player mode on it and everybody gets to be like one of the characters, and then just go fucking buck wild of like, you go to this one, I'll go to that one, I'll go to that one. We'll, split up, conquer and divide. You can get through that game in about 15 hours or less. Like I think that like I think me and my friends did that because I've loved the original Borderlands so much that when Borderlands 2 was coming out, I got a group together to replay Borderlands, and it was me and a few friends, and we got through that game in 2 days. Like we just had like a weekend where we just hung out and played Borderlands, and like it was a fucking blast. And like because we weren't getting bogged down in some of the back and forth that happens in those games, because one of us was always kind of close to where we needed to be, it was fucking sick. And like the other games totally benefited that. I think Dev and I, like I said with 3, we went so fucking hard into that it straight up broke parts of the game because like I didn't go places to get cutscenes that Devin was getting or some shit like that.
Yeah,
so, like,
we very much understood. All right, well, this is going to make us go here and then come back to where we are right now. You go get that shit, and I'm going to clear missions that are around L's garage.
Yeah, or I'm going to work on upping my gear, right? Because you spend a lot of time in menus in those games. While I'm dicking around getting the right shield sorted and selling the right shit, you go kill that guy.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll go kill that guy. and it's true. And it broke the game a little bit. But then to talk about the movie, I think that, like, again, this is stuff that people didn't understand. The people who are diehards who would want to see an adaptation of the first Borderlands game, which this is not, right? In so many ways, this is not an adaptation of the first game. But that's why people are mad that, like, Brick and Mordecai are not there, right? Why is it only 2 of the 4 people, and then people who show up in later iterations of the games?
One person you don't ever technically play as, right? Like the Tiny Tina of it all. Like she's not even a quote playable character in the games. Why would she be one of the?
Do you ever play as Tannis?
No.
Yeah,
you don't play as
the one
Tannis,
that I thought of
too. Tannis coming
everywhere.
in 40 minutes later and kind of sitting out some of the stuff later on makes sense. Her having a couple of moments with the gun was
the
sweet,
moment with the gun was great. We're like, let's get out of here, and she kills the guy who's blocking the way. Funny, and taking the gun like I needed a gun. Then you ask. like it was fun. That's the other thing is for everything about this particular film, what it accomplished best for me was recreating how insane a session of playing Borderlands, any of them with your friends, can be. Right?
Yeah.
They like that moment where Roland and Lilith are fighting about who's going to go first, and then there goes Devin. No, I'm already on the freaking thing. What are you talking about? Why are we going to decide the order that we want to go? Yes, I will admit that I am the chaotic presence when I play
One
these
of us
games.
floating the other over a hole.
Yeah.
I got you. No, you don't got me.
No, I got you. That Dale was so happy. I have this. Just let me do it. And then she dropped you, Sejohn. And I think, like, and that's the other thing, is there was this moment in the beginning where I'm like, are they even going to fuck with the new U system? Because, like, there was this moment. I cried as soon as Krieg picked up Tiny Tina and said, your girl is broken. Like, that was like, because I didn't realize that they weren't going to go the dad route or anything like that, right? Like, that tapped into memories I have from playing these games, and I started weeping at that line. And then, like, 5 minutes later, it's Lilith, like, being a cool fucking bounty hunter, and I'm like, why am I crying? What happened there? And then, like, I'm like, oh, that's what it was. Like, it was just so deep within me, that emotion in that moment. Right? So I understand. I know where that's coming from. I get where that's coming from for me. But still, I just don't understand how, if you're somebody who likes the Borderlands games, right? Which, like, that seems to be who they were aiming it for. They weren't trying to get cinephiles, people who love movies, to be like, I'm going to go see Borderlands. Maybe a little bit with the casting, but even then, like, I don't think it ever shied away from the fact that, like, this is going to be a big, dumb, stupid, fun movie.
No, I mean, I do think, like, if you want to talk about the type of movie it was aiming for, I do think Guardians of the Galaxy is kind of that realm, that sci-fi action adventure. Like, you know, we're gonna have there is a very superhero-y, Marvel-y aspect to this movie, right? Like that they're unabashedly playing it. I mean, they straight up, like, they invoke Star Wars multiple times. Like, I mean, they mentioned, like, a stormtrooper joke at some point for Kevin Hart making a joke about the Crimson Lance, but the other big moment is when Claptrap suddenly turns into R2-D2 for a second, for really only one moment in this movie. I really thought it was going to happen more. I thought he'd be doing a lot more, like, unlocking doors and shit like that. But really, just for one moment in this movie, when he falls backwards and projects a hologram of Lilith's mom, who straight up even does, like,
the Leia
I
shit?
bet if you timed it, it would even be to the moment when she then turns around because she hears gunfire behind her, and then back to the camera. Like, everything that happens in that moment.
That her turning away, I'm like, this is perfect. Like, that's what good homage does, right? Otherwise, you're just putting it in the movie because, hey, remember
You're just
Star
stealing
Wars?
It. Yeah, you're just, like, stealing it from a different movie. Right?
That moment where she looked away, I'm like, that was awesome. Like, that was the moment. And I'm glad that it's something that we both picked up on. And I don't know. Honestly, with this one, I don't know. I mean, there is one other X factor that we have to talk about, and that's the fact that Edgar Ramirez was in the Point Break remake. I kid. We have to talk about Jack Black as Claptrap.
I mean, well, especially on the heels of, I mean, this is the Say Report. We can tie all this shit together. But we also are on the heels of the Minecraft trailer coming out. Have you watched it yet, Dev?
I saw it before Beetlejuice.
Okay.
And this morning at 2:42 a.m., I woke up to a text saying, I'm not a fan of Minecraft at all, but I gotta say, the trailer is great, especially I Am Steve.
I was okay. So this is the thing. That trailer dropped, and I think the count on YouTube for me was like 11 hours later. So I did kind of miss the initial drop of it. But, like, I was at work, got off of work, watched that trailer, and was, like, delightfully surprised. As somebody that has some feelings about Minecraft and, like, the grander scheme of things and the, like, phenom that it's become, I wasn't expecting to be completely blown away by the trailer, and I wasn't. It looks like it's making some dumb choices that people are not going to like and all of that, right? Like, these are my initial thoughts. So, but I'm like, all right, but I'm down. And, like, the I Am Steve bit, that was the only part of the trailer that made me outright laugh. Like, when he turned around, and I had heard he was in it, but I had somehow gotten in my head he was playing, like a piglin or something. Like, he was playing somebody, a thing in the Minecraft world, not the thing. Yeah. So when he drops the line, I am Steve, I legitimately was like, surprise, guffawed. I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, let's do this. End of trailer. Cool. I then go on to see the internet reaction to it, and I am just astounded. All the way down to, I think, an article from The Independent of all fucking places, and like, fuck these guys, but just being like, we're all sick of Jack Black, and the world is finally sick of Jack Black, and it's been a long time coming, is like the headline. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? And it mentions in that, talking about, this the Minecraft trailer, some stuff that has happened with Tenacious D, which I'm sure that Devin and I will discuss here in a sec. But then it also then dropped the Borderlands movie in that. And I'm just like, man, like, the conversation about him being in the Minecraft movie and the conversation about him being in the Borderlands movie, this is such a wild thing. Like, they are very Jack Black roles. I mean, at least what we know about what's going on with the Minecraft movie now, but what we definitely know is now going on with Borderlands. Super, like, this is, Jack Black is totally the guy you call in for this, and it works. And, like, it's such a wild statement to make. Now, we want to tie that to some of the political stuff going on with like Tenacious D and Kyle Gass and him. That's a conversation we could talk about. Is like this idea of the mask kind of cracking a bit with people kind of seeing where the line is with a guy like him can definitely rub fans the wrong way. Some fans the wrong way. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Deb?
All right, so first of all, that whole Tenacious D, that pisses me off so much, especially when they had done the video where they dressed up as Klans members to infiltrate the White House in a fictional future in order to have their robot friend assassinate Donald Trump Jr. That's the thing that existed, and I say existed because in the wake of Kyle Gass's comments, it was scrubbed from the internet. And that is just insane to me. How quickly the internet can do things like that.
I would be interested to know if that video existed before.
2018, Sejohn. 2018.
Well, so no. So the video. Sorry, when the video was actually scrubbed, like the actual date that we know that video started to kind of disappear. Because since 2018, some of the stuff that has gone on with Jack Black is he's gotten super involved in certain aspects of the Biden administration, right? So like part of this that people kind of seem to not be talking about, some people are bringing it up, is that the idea is like he's not just talking about like his like film career. Like there are parts of the work that he does nowadays that are directly involved with the US government. So like there is something to be said about the fact that like that just can't he like we can't have that, right? Having an artist out there saying as an artist my artsy thoughts on these things are this. Okay, sure. Being a political pundit of some kind, being somebody that's involved in like in the actual scene and like having direct access to people is like, yeah, they probably need to watch the way that they talk about things a little bit more. That I mean, like, so like, I do from that element, from that angle, understand kind of this move to need to distance himself from those comments. Does anybody not know what happened? Kyle Gass said at a Tenacious D show in Australia, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dev, on that. But they were on tour in Australia and at a show.
Yep.
It was his birthday, so they bring a cake on stage and they said, "What do you wish for?" And being within a week or so after the assassination,
it was the weekend after. It was like the next day. It was the next day.
Yeah, I had the audacity to say, I hope the next bullet doesn't miss, or I hope the next person doesn't miss, something in that vein, right? And
I hope that next time they don't miss, I believe.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But something in that language, right? And it rubbed some people the wrong way to the point where Jack Black had to make a statement about needing to step away, canceling tour dates, just a bunch of stuff. Kyle Gass eventually got dropped by his own agency, I think, because of it. Like shit went real bad real fast in that regard. And so that's where I get kind of caught in the whole thing, is that Kyle Gass is not that political person. Kyle Gass is an artist out there and said something as an artist, and Jack Black distancing himself in terms of saying maybe I can't be on tour with this person right now, that I understand. Kyle Gass being in a position to suddenly not have an agent as an artist, that feels like weird to me. That's where the line was for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, the legacy of Post-Apocalypto, the last time that they had done anything related to it was in June of 2022, where they released nutrition bars with a limited edition box with artwork from the series Branded Fiber Delish, which is a reference to it. So, I don't know if it was when he got on board with the Super Mario Brother movie that it was scrubbed or anything like that. But also, Kyle Gass had a Tenacious D show kind of mirrored the type of shit that that his Tenacious D persona would have said. Like, that's the other thing. Like, it's not like we haven't made semi-political statements about this exact thing before, right? Like,
we've had. Now, just remind, like, is this? I don't. It's hard to separate hearsay and nonsense sometimes when we're talking about things like music groups. Just for me, there was a moment where the two of them had kind of parted ways for a while because they were not doing great, right? I guess like as a musical duo. Am I misremembering that, or like I don't want to like put words in anybody's mouth, so I don't know if like Kyle Gass like said something that like upset like him or anything like that. But they had Tenacious D had kind of been kind of not Tenacious D for a few years, right? They had kind of come back a few. Honestly, was it after the movie maybe not doing well or something?
At this, it doesn't look like there was ever a time where they weren't. I'm on their Wikipedia page right now. Rise to popularity. So then they have the TV series and the band. And then that goes until 2002. But then Pick a Destiny and that album, they're working from 2003 to 2007 on. So I think what it was more that, like, we're not going to do another album. Because Jack Black's like, I'm busy with the film stuff. And again, I don't 100% know that. But I think it was like the reason there was not a third album until Rise of the Phoenix, right? Yeah. Jack Black expressed wishing to take a year-long break from acting, though Gass hinted a desire for Tenacious D to end at their current high point after the film. But then they put out Rise of the Phoenix, like, right after that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, but Kyle Gass did say, like, you know, let's end on this high note, right? You want to be an actor and all this other stuff, but then they ended up doing Rise of the Phoenix, and then Post-Apocalypto, they went into that right afterwards.
Did they go on tour for that album though, or is it? Cause that would have been.
They went for Rise of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Interview Attack of the Show, Rise of the Phoenix, 6-minute film. No, I don't think that one had a tour on it. Based on what I'm reading.
Yeah, because I remember part of the big deal with the whole like tour being canceled stuff was that it was kind of like the first time people were going to get to see them in a decade or so. Like, it was kind of a huge deal that they were canceling, not just because of like, hey, you know, canceling a show is a big deal, but like this is also supposed to be some type of big comeback in some ways. It was just, a lot of fans had a lot of feelings. So like things were being said and spouted, and then like people wanted to be mad at Jack Black, people wanted to be mad at Kyle, people wanted to be mad at you know, each other. Like it's just one of those things that sparked a lot of like feelings in a lot of people because of what had happened. And highlighted in this moment of like the movie's also not doing well, because in addition to Borderlands having the problems that it did, right, the reaction now to what's going on with the Minecraft trailer. But again, I don't lay this kind of stuff at the feet of Jack Black at all. I think and to bring that out to the whole cast, right?
Yeah,
I don't think anybody in the cast of the Borderlands movie was fucking it up. There wasn't anybody that was doing anything that was like, oh, this is not working for me, right? Like at most, maybe some of the Tiny Tina stuff was having trouble landing for me because, as I said earlier, I just kept I kept feeling like things were being told to me about her, or she was saying things about that I should understand about her as a character that the movie wasn't justifying. But it wasn't in the ways in which this actress is delivering these lines, right? That is me having an issue with the script, right? And like that goes for a lot of this shit. And you know, the reaction to the Minecraft trailer, just to put a pin in that for now, because we got to wait until the movie comes out to really talk about it.
Yeah.
But like, sounds awfully familiar to a lot of the same shit we were hearing about going on with the Super Mario Brothers movie, and then suddenly that movie made a fucking $1 billion. So like, I don't believe fuck all about some of these opinions and attitudes right now about that trailer. Like, once we have a little bit more information to talk about, we can maybe get a little bit more into it. But my real last thought is, I also think Jason Momoa might be playing a living, like a humanized axolotl.
Possibly. I believe that they all get sucked into the video game, and he's the owner of the game shop that they get sucked into.
But the way that he's dressed,
he looks like the axolotl from the game.
Of the axolotl sprites from the game.
Maybe he escaped into the real world. Who knows? I mean, that was the only thing I knew about prior to seeing it, because there was a couple of young guys seated to my left for Beetlejuice, and one of them was on his phone the entire pre-show, talking about Minecraft, like, oh, fuck, they're doing that thing where they get sucked into the different world. Oh, I'm real excited about seeing that. And I'm just like, wow, how does someone so young have such a large chip on their shoulder? I'm like, geez, man, the cynicism on display. I have to be honest with you. I got Tenacious D tunnel vision. I forgot that we were talking about Borderlands. And I think the reason where it comes to that, right? And we don't need to go deeper into it, but like, Sejohn, we're collaborators, and it would really hurt me if like one stupid comment that I said meant the entire dissolution of our 18 years of friendship. Like, that's a real thing there.
Well, and for the record, I don't think that that's what happened with Tenacious D either. I mean, Jack Black has already talked about them getting back together in the future, just needing to take a break right now, and when things are like super hot. Like, I think it was like this happened in early July, and I think by August he was already talking about how him and Kyle are still very good friends, and that Tenacious D is definitely not done. So like, he was already reassuring people that like he's not like ridding Kyle of his life. Like, he's not shedding him from his like friend group or anything like that.
But at the time when it first happened, where a lot of the reactions from people came, right, where they would then do it, it felt like he had sold out his friend in order to protect his movie career, working with things like Borderlands and Minecraft. At least that's what a bunch of pundits that I read said, right? And to me, I'm like, man, I hope that they're okay. And I was excited when he's like, no, like, it's just right now at this time, maybe touring is not the right thing to do. Maybe we wait until after the election, things like that. Because I also had another creative friend who I was talking to about it. He's like, but also you need to consider all of the violence that takes place at concerts. That like, it's like, on one level, yes, you made a political statement, and like a couple of days after the thing happened, right? Like, that's a dangerous thing. But it's also joking about people just getting shot and killed in a venue where like concerts have become one of the big places for those things to happen.
Or political reasons. Yeah.
Like, it
100%.
Like, there are other things. It's not just the Trump of it all. And that's another one. Like, Claude, when we talked about it, he's like, a lot of people don't know about Post-Apocalypto. Just because you and I know about it doesn't mean the world knows about it. But also, there's one thing about doing a satire, and there's another thing about making a comment that like that when it's still active in the news cycle.
Yeah,
and it's very like good points.
He made a bad joke. Like, I think that is something I can agree with in all of this. It was a bad joke in bad taste. Do I think it should have meant all of the things that happened? Not necessarily, but it's easy for me to say that in hindsight. Also, not being involved, right? Like, again, we don't know what things were really truly like behind the scenes, because you're right. The safety aspect of all of it is very much what Jack Black was touting at the time. Was talking about how, for the safety of his crew and for the safety of his audience, he didn't feel comfortable continuing going on this tour right now with the atmosphere. And I mean, and again, as we've pointed out, within a week of a presidential candidate of the United States getting shot at, a woman dying at that very like event, like this was not hypothetical shit that people were basing all of this concept on. We had an actual event to point to within that week. So like, yeah, I 100% like I can appreciate the safety side of that conversation for sure.
And it was July 14th that he made the comment, and July 13th it was my dad's birthday. And he didn't make a wish on his birthday candles that got him quote unquote canceled. I don't know. August 6th. I did want to use this as like, as the sort of just platform to address that thing that is, it's been weighing on me since it happened. So I'm sorry. But what's your final thing?
The only other thing that I think I would say about all of this stuff with like trying to levy like any kind of huge criticism about the Borderlands movie or the Minecraft movie by extension on just simply the presence of Jack Black is like, if you don't think this is the first time that he has been involved in a film or two that has sunk ship and come back from it just fine, right? Like, we're talking about the man in Gulliver's Travels. I think he's going to be okay from having a couple of bad movies that didn't land, especially because we are also talking about, just to invoke the other movie once again, the Super Mario Brothers movie, and the success of him as Bowser in that film cannot go unrecognized, right?
You can also feel free to go back to our 92nd episode, The Shallow Report, where we talk about Shallow Hal, starring none other than Jack Black. And if Shallow Hal didn't ruin that guy's career, I don't think that Borderlands or even Minecraft, if it ends up being as bad as everybody is predicting, will
I
do
will
it.
say that I've seen a lot of people say with the Minecraft trailer that the Jack Black part was actually the only part of it they thought they actually were interested in, because the rest of it was like already kind of offending them. That Jack Black showing up was almost kind of like comic relief, which literally is I think what he's going to be in that movie, right? Like that. So that landed, and I would point to those people and say, well, in that case, it sounds like this movie might understand exactly who like what they're doing, right? Like if the guy that's supposed to make you laugh showed up on screen and you laughed instantly, I think you might want to give this movie a try.
So the trailer for Minecraft started and I'm like, I just am not interested in that. I've never played Minecraft. I don't understand the appeal of it. It is a rare, just black spot in my knowledge of pop culture. Minecraft is. But when Jason Momoa put down like the ingot and the little piece of wood and then fast crafted like a bucket, that was so funny to me. I'm like, that was cool. The way
People
that
are all
they just made
pissy
the
because he
crafting
didn't
happen.
place those little things. Like, he didn't place them into, like, specific slots on the table like you do in the menu on Minecraft. That is, like, one of the big critiques people are levying against that trailer. And I'm just like, that is so stupid. In my mind, visually, I never considered those slots to actually be, like, slots on the table, but rather just literally like they show in the movie. This is just the tabletop. You're putting these down and you're hammering at them. You're doing whatever magical thing to make them happen. That moment encapsulated exactly in my mind what I always assumed you were doing.
I'm like,
for real in the game, just not menuized.
that is crafting in a video game 101. That was such a real visceral reaction to me of like, yeah, let me put down these two little things and then bah, bah, bah. Wow, look at what I built. I'm like, oh, it did it, right? It's like
wrong. Still looks dumb as hell, still looks goofy as shit, but like but it's not like, oh my god, filmmaker knowing that, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna go drink bleach because of it. Like, no, that's what it is. That's me taking a baseball bat and friggin' nails and then somehow taking duct tape and creating a bat with nails in it. Thank you, Dead Rising 2. Have I ever told those stories about how into Dead Rising 2 me and my roommate were on the cruise ship, that we made a bunch of our own zombie fighting stuff using things on the ship?
Great.
Oh, it was fun. Like, we would just like duct taped a bunch of stuff together, and then like our room steward found it. He's like, what is this? And we're like, that's nothing, you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, room inspection was about grand.
It was a good time. But yeah, like it felt like crafting. And then to get back to Borderlands, it felt like Borderlands. And there was also some real nice deep cut references. Marcus was fantastic. Mm-hmm. The whole on the bus Vault Hunter like orientation, like, yeah, but I'm not a Vault Hunter. This bus is only for Vault Hunter transport.
Yeah, the masks. I love the masks. Like kind
awesome.
of alluding to the things that like the costumes you can put on as the characters. Like, yeah, I thought that was a blast.
So good. Like it had all those elements. But then the real big one for me was when Marcus recognized Lilith despite her having the mask on because of her weapon. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the weapon that he referenced would have been the reference is the gun she used because she never had to reload, right? Vlad off Infinity, I never forget that gun. And I'm like, cool, thank you for explaining why she hasn't ever had to reload that weapon while she's been reloading other weapons.
All she has to do is the flip and it's ready to go again, right?
Yeah, like it was these cool references to like parts of the game that are uniquely Borderlands.
Oh, you know the one that got me instantly in the beginning, in the first 10 minutes of the movie, in the first 5 minutes of the movie, when Roland is doing the whole escape with Tina and guns start firing, they use the gun effects from the franchise. Yeah. And the second I heard them, it like hit me like a sledgehammer, like right in the chest. I was just like, oh my god, like that is exactly what those guns sound like in the game. Like, so those kinds of references all over the place. Like I mentioned earlier, like putting just putting the word doll on a door as they go into the caustic mines was just like, this movie knows exactly what it knows exactly what it's doing in terms of the world.
That doll made me smile, and I'm not even like as deep in this world. Every Malawan truck, and the fact that like Malawan also exists, but we ain't hearing about them right now.
Right? Yeah.
Like, Yeah, it was good. Like I really enjoyed this film, and one of the bigger mysteries that I will have to solve is what didn't work for people. And now that I've finally seen the movie, I am excited this next week to dive into all those videos I have been bookmarking of people like, so I saw the Borderlands movie, so you didn't have to.
Yeah, you can take that dive into the shit
I'll
for
take
me
it.
because I have no interest in that kind
I
of
will
nonsense.
dip my face into that brown water because I am curious to hear. Because the only critique I had heard of this film before watching it was from somebody who watched it, and you know, I respect him. He does a lot of game stuff. I understand that stuff. It's my buddy Joe, and he's like 30 minutes into the film, I understand what everybody's problem is. The CGI is like looks cheap, and then like I'm gonna stop with that, right? Like the CGI looks cheap, but in the back of my head, I'm like, this was a PS3 game, right? Like, I know that that's not what they're going for, right?
But how could you be have this really weird?
Like,
I think people have a really hard time identifying when something is stylized with CGI. I think that's something that a lot of people like to when they don't like the style, they attribute it to being made poorly, and I don't think it's made poorly at all. I think that there's definitely some choices being made and being a little over the top, being a little goofy, being a little overly forgiving. Like I said, like the reload mechanic on some of the guns being that the barrel flips and spins. Like if you actually probably stop that frame by frame, it physically would not make sense how that barrel spins because it seems to like go through people's hands as it does.
Yep.
But like the joke of that's how you reload some of the games, some of the guns in this world. And like you see that in the games, you see that in other guns that are present. It's like there's a silliness to this world that is clearly a stylistic choice, that it would be kind of over the top like that and nonsense like that. Like that is so in line with what's going on everywhere else in this world that like it's not offensive to me. If you don't like it, like that's fine, but like I don't think it's cheaply done at all.
Yeah, it's the big one with CGI.
Not that, but by the way, sorry, I don't want that totally sounded like I was calling out your friend specifically. I don't know what specific moments he was talking about, and I would love to hear them. But like that is one that I think is obviously kind of goofy enough that I could see somebody kind of latching onto. Honestly, beyond that, I don't see much else with the rest of this movie. Like I love like the color, I love the coloring, I love the kind of the softness to a lot of the CGI that you see, like the kind of over the topness. That moment when Krieg flies through the air and then lands on the thing and sends Lilith flying in the early kind of we have to have fight each other moment. That is clearly CGI though, and his body has kind of like a cartoony like almost Michael Jordan in Space Jam like stretch to it for like a moment, and like yeah, that is kind of silly CGI, but again, clearly a choice being made for what this scene is in this moment. It's very Looney Tunes-esque almost, right? Over the top because of the fact that there are actual guns and bombs involved. And I wish that Eli Roth could show me some of these action scenes with some blood and guts, right? The way he intended, for sure. But at the end of the day, still cartoonish.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing is also it's based on a game that has cel-shaded what is called toon style graphics, right? The fact that they continue to tell Wind Waker Link Toon Link means that like two gamers, cel shading equals cartoon, right? I don't agree with that, but it is just how that lexicon works and how that categorization works. So him stretching in that moment, like that's fine. He's a psycho. That's what psychos do. They move in weird ways, right? And I mean, part of the reason
it's also interesting that we've talked this whole time about the CGI, and this is the first time that I'm going to mention Claptrap. We've talked this entire time about this movie, and it's the first time I'm going to talk about the fact that like Claptrap is a character in this movie, and like didn't even really kind of think about the fact that he was completely CGI the whole time. Like that was not something that I picked. Like it wasn't like he showed up on screen and I was just like, oh, more of the bad CGI moments, right? Like I actually honestly wonder if they had Claptrap puppets on set and they were just kind of maybe like interspersing with like some CGI or something. I don't know. Like I couldn't tell you. Some of it was clearly CGI, but like not offensive to me.
When the wheel would go horizontal from vertical, like I'm like, well, that was CGI, but mostly because like it couldn't do that and then still stay up, right?
Right,
Like
right.
the weight distribution wouldn't allow weight distribution really wouldn't allow it to exist at all, which is how you know it's CGI. I don't know. In terms of CGI, the one that I always like kind of point at is people losing their mind over Axel in Thor Love and Thunder when he uses magic to communicate with them from across the galaxy. Like, oh, that looks so fake. And I'm like, well, cause it is fake, but also we don't fucking know what magic astral projection looks like. Maybe it looks like bad CGI. Shut up.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, these are the same people then that will look at like stop motion movies and talk about them being like the pinnacle of the technology at the time, and they're and not acknowledging that there was criticism at the time saying this looks ridiculously fake, right? Like, I've been replaying the Borderlands game, the BioShock games lately. In BioShock 2, there's an entire amusement park scene, and one of the big moments for Andrew Ryan in that moment is you find a tape from him talking about his figure in the Disney-esque world and how waxen and sullen and like stiff it moves, but somehow people still buy into this idea. Kids specifically buy into this idea of it being a real thing, and he doesn't understand it. And all I could think is there's always been somebody like this, right? There's always been some asshole who's been like, it looks fake. It's just like, okay, I have the ability to watch a thing and like magic and like allow myself to be given over to it, and I'd like to do that in peace, please.
Right. But and again, I'm not calling Joe. Thank you, Joe. Joe's actually one of the reasons I was able to watch the Borderlands film.
On it. Like,
right.
Seriously.
No,
like, I would
like,
be very interested to hear specifics.
I would like to hear specifics on that. But then the other thing is that, like, it's weird to critique the CGI in a film that is based on something that was done, like, 2 console generations ago. Right?
With
like,
purposely cartoony CGI
like, it's like
styling, right?
Like, maybe the CGI looks cheap by modern standards, but if their goal was to recreate what Borderlands looked like, there was never a moment in this film where I was like, man, this doesn't feel like Borderlands. Actually, there was one moment where I'm like, this feels like Mad Max, but then, like, oh, where did Borderlands get a lot of its inspiration from? It's not the other way around.
Yeah, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't also kind of talk about, like, just as somebody that has talked about being, you know, so deep in the Borderlands stuff as I am, like, the ways in which the Borderlands franchise has had some problematic stuff in the games, the ways in which it's handled women, and specifically the gaze on the feminine body and things like that, and, you know, Mad Moxie being one of the prime examples of that, since the first game being kind of this cheesecake figure in the world, while also somehow still being one of the most powerful. And I think they do a lot of correcting in the later games to really kind of give her a lot more agency and authority in the world, to the point where they feel like they can kind of justify then her having this existence with her physical appearance, like her acceptance with it and stuff. And I'm this is not me critiquing it one way or the other, saying it's good or bad. This is just what the games do, is they clearly try and make sure that you understand that Moxie is very much a woman of power and chooses to present herself in this world in this way. So, like, scenes in this movie of her just straight up just being in lingerie, which they just randomly cut to a moment where her and her whole bar staff are just standing around behind it, and just straight up just, we've removed all pretense. She doesn't have the jacket or the hat on or anything like that, or she might have the hat on, but anyway.
But
like, there's just this whole idea that, like,
off her jacket
that is how this character has existed in the game. And so I'd be remiss if I did not talk about the ways in which they bring that into the movie, right? In which they do some of that cheesecake stuff again. But interesting that they don't seem to linger or play with it as much as the games really do. Like, the games really kind of line up some stuff like that is really inappropriate, and like things like having a tip jar, I'm pretty sure is one of the mechanics in 2, if I'm remembering correctly, where if you throw money into it, the ways in which she comes over, speaks to you, and bends over the bar and things like that, or like comments that she makes that this movie kind of leaned into in a couple of moments. But by not making her such a predominant character in the movie, it's not as persistent as it is in the games. Because in the games, especially 2 and 3, like, she becomes a persistent presence, to the point where this bit can get really kind of uncomfortable in a lot of moments because of what you're doing with what's going on with this character at the same time. Like, so just another big, like, Borderlands, like, game to film kind of push that this movie makes, that again could be a place for controversy, but I haven't heard anybody talking about this. I haven't heard anybody talk enough specifics at all about why they didn't like this movie.
Yeah. And that's why I'm willing to go wading in the dirty water to find out this week. And so maybe I'll have something. I mean, we got a little bit of things planned for our 400th episode, but that might be part of it. What I will say is, in brief, getting set up for this, actually trying to find the, when Oprah joined the show briefly, as I was trying to find the release date, one of the criticisms is that Jamie Lee Curtis and Gina Gershon, fantastic character actors, wind up just playing genre types. And it's like, how can you be like, they're great character actors, but then they just play genre types? Like, that's literally what you just said they do. And I will say this, Gina Gershon's Moxie was a great take on the character, right? Like, she just, like, right into it, like, no muss, no fuss. I know who you are, Lilith, da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, it felt just like a lived-in character. And I loved that.
And instantly this kind of understanding that Moxie is this figure kind of above the good and evil conversation that's happening in this moment, right? Which is what she's in the games.
Yeah, she's
she's kind of she's very demigod-esque. One of the big things from the games that I think that they lean into purposely, and I actually really love about the character, is that there's no kind of telling how old she truly is. She seems kind of infinite. Like, you meet a lot of characters that are her offspring, her kids. And, like, those kids range in age from, like, young kids to much older kids. There's some understanding that she might possibly just completely, like, deep down the line, might possibly be Tina's mom with Krieg, but that never is confirmed or denied, and it doesn't, and there's not nearly as much evidence as there is for the whole Krieg dad conversation. So, like, but, like, this idea that Moxie is kind of somewhat related to everybody. Moxie is kind of somewhat above the evil fights that are going on until we get to characters like Handsome Jack and, like, the takeovers and then, like, the death of the planet. Then suddenly she feels the need to get involved. Gandalf, that would be the one that I would point to. She is very Gandalf-esque in the video games storylines, in that she shows up when she needs to. She's extremely powerful and can make sure shit gets done. She is clearly trying to make sure everybody is safe. Like, she's trying to do what we would consider to be the good thing, but we're never quite sure how she got into this position, where she landed, how powerful she truly is, right? And, like, and it's this great role. Like, it's just mysterious enough in the games that she has landed in as one of people's favorite characters from the whole franchise. And I think the movie does a really good job of also capturing that in the little bit of time that we have her.
Yeah, and there's also that scene, like, if we're just going to put a hat right on it and point to it, where the Galbog kills her and she returns as Moxie the White. That doesn't happen. That's called humor. But just making sure that I don't want to get somebody like, "What's fucking wrong? What the hell is that?" Like Season's not wrong. This does feel like dicey territory. Speaking of her children, did you catch Scooter and Ellie in the last scene in the village? Because it made me very happy. Like, she was standing behind them like a proud mother. But then the fact that, like, they are credited as Scooter and Ellie also leads me to believe that cutscene from the Roth release of this film had to have had deeper moments for each of them.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels strange that, like, it's a blink and you miss it cameo that her kids are there. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And they're like, I missed it. And I'm like, well, we're not backing it up. They were there. And then I found them there. And the photos of them as those are on their IMDb page. So it felt right. I overall enjoyed this film a lot. And then Jamie Lee Curtis as Tanis, like, Tanis is exactly that. And I also liked this weird sort of 3 generations of women, 4 generations, if we want to talk about Moxie, but she's not there in the group long enough for it, of, like, this weird sort of found family. I could make an argument for this being in the Adam Sandler cinematic universe. I won't, but I could make the argument.
No, and that's the other big thing about the Borderlands games. And again, this is more as the games have grown, but they've always had a very good, like, focus. For as much as there's definitely criticism to be made about its masculine gaze on the feminine body and all of that sort of stuff, the ways in which women are presented in these games, in the moment-to-moment stuff and the costuming and stuff like that, not always great. Conceptually, what they have always tried to do with the women in these games has been fantastic. And I mean, all the way down to just some of the later games being almost, you would argue, like, like percentage-wise, flipping the average percentage and becoming much more women heavy in its storytelling and the stories that it's telling versus some of its predecessors. Like it's not a this is a criticism and a critique that is often thrown at 3 specifically. I think also probably then also Tiny Tina's Wonderland and stuff about the ways in which this franchise has quote unquote gone woke, and I don't want to have that conversation because I don't agree with it, and I think giving it any more credence than pointing out it exists is a disservice to actual conversations about criticisms of the Borderlands games and the Borderlands franchise. But like the ways in which they have always elevated like women to just these really important parts of the story has been something that I have always adored about this franchise. And again, the movie does a great job of capturing that, just like you said, this way that it explores this 3 generations of women who all clearly have trauma from the ways in which this world exists and all that. Awesome. Just fantastic work in that regard.
I don't know. It was enjoyable. It was an enjoyable time. And I think that's the last that I have to say. I mean, I enjoyed my time with it. And I hope that now that it is available, and once it is free to stream on one of the platforms, right? Right now it is still $19 to rent, $25 to buy on Amazon. That is ultra high def though, if you can take advantage of it, right? At least they're not selling like crap versions of it.
No, and if this is not normally your type of movie, if you're not sure you're still interested even after all that we've said, like, I totally get that. My thing is, take a chance on this movie someday. You know, if it comes up free on Netflix in the next few months, like, check it out. Or, like, if you're 10 years from now and you see it in a $5 bin at Walmart, buy it. Check this movie out, because I think that it definitely hits all of the points that I needed it to. Do I think that it's going to be the best movie of the year? Do I think it's secretly sleeper, like, going to be one of those classics that comes around? And no, I don't. Do I think there will be a Roth cut someday? I don't. But I had a damn good time with this movie, and I'm excited that I saw it. And I'm happy I own it. Did I mention that I did end up buying it? Because as Devin pointed out, it was only like a couple of extra dollars more just to buy it on Amazon. And as somebody that has a bunch of Amazon credits sitting around from doing Prime delivery day choices, you ever do that? Where like they're like, hey,
and you get like, here's $3 if you have it delivered a day later. Like,
that shit adds up. Like if you like, I work from home and all that, so I have like business mail that comes here and stuff that we order stuff from Amazon for that. So like I always pick that option, and it's just like, yeah. So now I have 10 extra bucks in Amazon credits. So when I go to something like this where I'm just like, oh, for $5 extra, I can get this, and that $5 extra can come out of a credit bucket. Fuck yeah. So yeah, I just bought it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm not gonna say there won't be a Roth cut of this until we get the physical release. I mean, if it exists, like you throw that on as a secret bonus extra thing with buying the film, an unrated version.
Or sell. I was gonna say sell the unrated version. Yeah.
Like, and I'd be very interested to see it, because that was, and I'm not one of these people who are like, man, movies are not realistic if people can't swear in them. I think that's such a weird critique, because at the end of the day, it's entertainment, it's fiction, right? So, like, this movie wasn't real enough because they weren't saying the fuck word every 2 seconds. I don't get that criticism, but
there was also a 2-foot robot rolling around the entire time that seemed pretty much invincible.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go with that. But in a film like this, where there was so much fighting and the game has so much violence in it, for there not to be blood when they shot people in the head, like for that really, really great scene where Roland just like started shooting the pipes so that the caustic water would attack the blood shots. Like, I'm like, that's so good. But like, it's Eli friggin' Roth. He made friggin' Cabin Fever. You don't think he had some wicked great shots of the, like, flesh just sloughing off of their bodies?
And then still fighting, because that's also the big thing, is like, and this is something that is in the games that I wish that I will say, I wish there had been more. People can get hurt in the world of Borderlands and pretty much keep moving, right? There's a lot of people in the world of Borderlands that seemingly just have exposed bone. Or exposed muscle in areas, like all sorts of, like, people could get chunked up pretty good and still keep going in this world due to a lot of factors. The drugs, like there's a lot of health but also you pointed out the new use stuff, which they do in the games try and act like not everybody has access to, but yet I've never played as a character in those games that didn't have access to them. So like, but like this idea that like people should be getting hurt in this, and they're just not. The people are either alive or dead, essentially, and there's no in between.
Like, I was fully fully expecting there to be a moment where like Roland got killed and they like all mourned it, and then he's like, "What are y'all crying about?"
Yeah,
Like,
comes back in a new U machine, like
there
behind
was
them,
this,
right?
there was
Well,
this,
I mean, but just to point out another silly thing that the movie then does is that then they make a huge deal out of the fact that the president of Atlas has a shield, like has shield tech on him.
Yeah.
And like so we're supposed to ooh and ah this shield tech, which implies that not everybody does, but then also we've just seen other people just take bullets and keep moving. So like the shield tech's not that impressive, brother.
other than the fact that they can't hurt him. Right, like it's impressive
but
that he's in this moment
it seems
where
like no one could get hurt anyway.
yeah, right. But like that was like his ace in the hole, and it led to that really nice moment where like she phase shifted to steal it off of him.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think the saddest thing about this film is that we're never gonna see a sequel because Eli Roth did a pretty great job building a cinematic Borderlands world. And I would.
Yeah,
love
I'm not
to
even a
get
huge
to
Eli
play
Roth fan.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to the work the guy does. He's just not like he's not one of my favorite filmmakers because I don't love the genre he often works in. But like, I think he did fantastic with this movie, and I will say that other Eli Roth projects I have seen, I have enjoyed. Like he's not going to be one of those guys that I am automatically on board just because it's his movie, you know?
Yeah, for me, it starts and ends with Cabin Fever. That film found me at the right time in my life for it to be a bit of an obsession. Face, to quote Eli Roth in Cabin Fever. I don't think I've seen any of his other directorial films that he directed because I haven't seen any of the Hostel
I think of like
films.
Inglourious Bastards where he plays
Donnie the
where he
Bear
plays
Jew, which was almost Adam Sandler, just to like because I brought him up. But like I'm looking at the stuff that he's directed, like the Thanksgiving thing in Grindhouse was good, but I didn't see anything like I haven't seen the actual movie. I've seen the Rotten Fruit video, but again, that was on the Cabin Fever thing.
Nice.
Oh, I saw Green Inferno. Green Inferno was exceptional.
Oh God, yes, but very much in that genre that I am just not into, right?
No,
you know the one that
I
I always think of isn't he the one that did the other Jack Black movie
House with the Clock in its
House with the Clock
and Kate Blanchett? If you're going to talk about that, it's both of them.
Oh, that's right.
Yes,
I forgot that.
But I've never seen it. I just really wanted to see it, and then it was in theaters around here for a day, and that disappointed me.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that one I will. You know who one of the writers is on that? The boys in Supernatural there. Kripke.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so like it's got legs, and I think it's a great adaptation like of the book and stuff. Yeah,
and also
so,
Knock Knock. I didn't realize that he was the one behind Knock Knock. I only think about Keanu Reeves when I think about that movie. I haven't seen that one either, but you know.
Like I said, I'm not gonna see every movie Eli Roth ever made because there are some of his movies that are just not my bag. But I think this movie was awesome, and I've seen other stuff from him that I've enjoyed. So
I'm definitely gonna watch House of Clock in its walls. I'll be honest about that one. And yeah, Green Inferno. But you're right. If you're not into like the horror genre, and then that one's even one of those horror genres that like weirdly exploits an indigenous race.
Mm-hmm.
So like.
Exploitative, over-the-top violence is very much what I would say Eli Roth likes to play with.
Yeah.
Which is why I think, which is
why you hire him to do a Borderlands movie.
Right. But also why I think then fans would take issue with him not getting to be the one to really kind of see it through to the finish line, right? And so I think a lot of the immediate reaction definitely is wrapped up in a lot of that stuff. But what that leads to is people not seeing the movie, not going to see the movie and talking about it with like informed criticism, but just not seeing the movie, right?
Yeah. If there was one thesis from this, and then we will wrap this up, it is I do not understand how you could watch that movie and hate that movie if you were somebody who was a fan of it. Because even though it's not like the Eli Roth over the top, it's still a very functional film, right? It's not a sandwich. It is a movie.
Well, I mean, we talked about them bringing Tim Miller into me. I mean, like we like not a guy that is new to the scene, right?
Right. True. Yeah. So I think that's it. Anything else that we want to say about this one before we send it away, Steve Jim?
Oh no, I could talk about this movie forever because I could talk about Borderlands forever. So let's wrap this up.
All right, excellent. So we hope you enjoyed us taking a bit of a critical look at the Borderlands film. And yeah, we both enjoyed it. So if you're somebody who's familiar with the games and like you've been a little turned off, I mean, again, you don't need to pay the full price that's available. Wait until it's available on a streaming thing that you already subscribe to, or if you have the opportunity. In fact, I mentioned to some people that we were doing a Borderlands episode, and they're like, "Oh man, I meant to see that. Is it still in theaters around here?" And like, no, it's available on Amazon, which means it's easier for you to get. I'll say that.
There is one theater around me that is doing like an 11 o'clock at night showing every night this week, and that's it.
The Route 1 Cinema Pub in North Attleboro is the closest theater to me that is still showing it, which I just found that out looking at the IMDb. So it's out there still, but it's also, you can rent it and watch it at home, and that seems to be how people prefer to take in movies right now. One last thing that I want to say is that Astrobot came out, and all this hype about it being the best like 3D platformer game in years, definitely earned. I have really enjoyed my time with Astrobot, and I have
to the point where like
PlayStation
has almost adopted that little guy as their new mascot at this point, haven't they?
Well, like after Astro's Playroom, the free pack-in game with the PS5, that kind of happened. Mm-hmm. And like, so yeah, this is very much Astro is now our Mario, and this is Astro's Galaxy. You are flying around space, you are going to planets. It doesn't have the gravity mechanics, but other than that, yeah, it feels like you're playing Mario Galaxy 3, and I am here for it. And in this talk of a movie based on a video game, it felt kind of nice to just get some actual video game talk in there. So if you are one of the few who has a PS5, highly recommend it. If you have Steam or Switch, Bakaru is now available, and I still love that game. I have not finished my Japanese playthrough yet, though. I'm a bad video game player, Sejohn. Yeah, so I guess the last thing, just like, it is our 400th episode next week, and just as a bit of a disclaimer, we're not going to be doing no 5-hour episode this time. So just so you're aware of it. But I think it'll be fun. I think we're going to have some fun stuff that we've been talking about, so it should be a good one. But if you want to be a part of it, then you could join our Discord on any of our social media sites, so Facebook, X, formerly Twitter. There is an invitation available, so come join the Discord, join the conversation. But if you just want to contact us like the old school way, you can always send an email to thesayreport@gmail.com. And if you put Devon or Sejohn in the subject line, then we'll make sure it is for their eyes only. I don't know why I decided to talk in the third person there, but it felt kind of right. I'm just going to be honest about it. And we can send you an invitation that way, or you can just communicate with us via email, right? It worked for 15 years before we decided that texting or private messages or, Zoom was the only way. So Tweeter. Yeah, poor Tweeter. But yeah, so I think that's everything. Last chance, Siege, before we close the book on this one.
No, let's do it.
Alrighty. Will, hopefully you're finished with your emergency meeting and you can bring us home. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.